Hello and welcome. You're watching WCTV with me, your host, Queen Banda. In our studios today, we're joined by Mr. Jeff Wofferson, the Acting Commissioner for the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, here to talk about standardized testing, what the tests were created for and why. Is the system working or is it time to change it? So stay tuned, more information coming your way. So I'm very glad that you are in our studios. The discussion of standardized testing, it can be a heated subject, and especially when you're talking about the pros and cons of standardized testing. So to begin, let's talk about what these tests were designed to do and why.
Well, let's talk about testing in general.
Okay.
In an education system, I don't think you can ever have teaching without testing to find out how students are doing. And that happens at different times during the year, at different levels. It could be a pop quiz or a final exam or a district-wide test that's given. The standardized tests, I think that you're probably referring to, are our MCAS tests.
Yes.
That have been part of our Massachusetts educational system since the late 1990s. And it's a way of checking in and seeing how our students and our schools are doing on a test that everybody across the state is taking. So it makes it very easy for us to understand the results and compare the results.
Very good. However, the people who oppose standardized testing, especially MCAS, that is being administered every single year, they say that it is inaccurate. Some students do not test so well, and that it doesn't reflect what a student knows and what teacher is teaching. So what do you have to say about that? It's
not a be-all and end-all. We don't claim that MCAS teaches everything, and we certainly know that some students react differently. But students are going to have to learn to take tests at some point in their life. If you want to go to college, you'll need to take college admissions tests. If you want to go to graduate school, if you want to go into the armed forces, many employers give tests.
Very good. So you say that they're important and that nerves or no nerves, you would have to learn to take this test, because it's not only in elementary school or secondary school. As you continue on with your higher education, you're going to see more and more of these tests, right?
Certainly won't get through college without taking some tests. For our students, the only high stakes test is really the 10th grade test.
Okay.
Students have to pass that to graduate, and that's important. Before education reform started in Massachusetts, we had too many students who were graduating high school and they really didn't have the basic English and math skills that they would need to succeed after high school. Massachusetts diploma should mean something, and our 10th grade MCAS test, which is a requirement for graduation, helps ensure that students have those basic skills. And we use the results to gauge how the student is doing and whether they need extra help, to gauge how the school is doing and whether the school needs extra help.
All right. So you talked about math, science, English, and people say that these are subjects that have been highlighted. They're only subjects that we reinforce, and they worry that it undermines other subjects such as the arts. They fear that standardized testing promotes narrow curriculum and excessive testing undermines Americans' ability to produce innovators and critical thinkers. What do you have to say about this?
There's no question that we are focusing now in our assessment system on English language arts, math, and science, because we think those are foundational subjects. If you're going to be successful in any field, you're going to need to have those basic skills. And we're looking at potentially adding a history and social science test as well, because we're not only trying to educate students for their future jobs, but for their future roles as citizens. Arts are very important. It's much more difficult to assess students' ability on a standardized test in the arts, but we also know that schools that have arts curriculums and other subjects that interest students, they actually wind up doing better on the MCAS test, because the students are more interested in coming to school and doing well there. So we're trying to find a balance. We're trying with our new test design that we're starting to implement in Massachusetts to focus the test even more on the critical thinking skills that you were referring to. MCAS is not a fill-in-the-blanks bubble test, the way that some have criticized it. It's specifically designed to test students not only their knowledge but their skills and their abilities. Now there's skills we can't test right now on MCAS. For instance, the skill of working cooperatively on projects is a very important skill for our students to learn, and we're looking at ways we can assess that.
Okay, now this new MCAS test, last year's results were not so promising. From what I read, according to the Boston Globe, most parents, teachers, students, they talked about that the test was very hard.
It was rigorous,
Okay.
and it was designed to be rigorous.
All right.
Again, when we talk about the original MCAS test, that was designed back in the 1990s, and that was a long time ago. And what colleges expect today, what employers expect today, almost 30 years later, is a lot more from students.
Now, if you say that the curriculum has been changing to prepare the students very well for college and so on, but if the results showed that the students are not quite there yet, where do you think the disconnect is? Do we need more time for students to prepare themselves and get used to this rigorous kind of work?
The curriculum takes some time to implement. It's very difficult to change an entire curriculum quickly. You've got students at all different ages, and only the youngest ones will be seeing the new curriculum from their first years in school. Some students do need more time, and that's one of the things we've learned over the years, is that we have larger and larger numbers of English language learners in the Commonwealth these days. They need extra support. They many times need extra time in the classroom. So those are all things our schools are trying to do to make sure students are ready for college.
Now, let's talk about consequences, right? We touched upon them a little bit, where you talked about that the 10th grade testing, the MCAS, is the one that really actually matters. If a student does
It matters from the student standpoint. We use all the MCAS results to evaluate schools and determine where we're going to help schools. But from the student standpoint, the 10th grade test is the high stakes test.
Okay. So, and if, let's say, a classroom or a school who has been having a track record of lower results or testing scores, they can also face some consequences, right? Teachers can lose their jobs.
I don't think there's ever been a teacher who's lost his or her job simply because of test scores. We certainly want schools, as they're evaluating teachers, to pay attention to how well the students are doing. I mean, doesn't that sort of make common sense that if your job is teaching, you want to know that you're doing it well? But there's so many variables that go into individual student success, and it's not just what one teacher is doing in one class, but what the whole school is doing. So when we look to schools to evaluate teachers, we expect that they are looking at a whole range of skills and competencies.
So no pressure at all when it comes to standardized testing to the teachers themselves?
I'm sure teachers feel pressure. I mean, if you're a teacher, you're going to feel a lot better if your classes are doing really well on MCAS as opposed to the students who are not doing well. One of the things we look at and expect schools to look at is not so much the scores, but how well students are improving. We know that students from families that are well off, that have a lot more advantages in life, they've got a head start on their education. Our job is to make sure that all of the kids, whether they have those advantages or not, get to the finish line by the time they finish high school. And so one of the things we've done here in Massachusetts, and it's now been copied in many other states, is we look not just at the student's score, but how those scores are improving from year to year. What's the growth in the student's learning? So wherever the student is when they start a year, we'd like to know that they've gotten a year or more's worth of learning by the end of that year.
So now you said that not actual consequences, but rather, no actual pressure, but rather teachers may feel the pressure of having their students to perform well in this test? Aren't you worried that that same pressure is going to be trickled down to the students, kind of pushing the students to be better test takers instead of exciting them to learn and to understand in depth what they're learning?
I'm sure you're right, and I'm sure that happens, and I'm dismayed when I hear about that happening. I think it's the job of all of us adults in the educational system, whether it be those of us at the department or administrators in a school or teachers in a school or the parents and the families, not to be putting pressure on students, but to be encouraging them to do their best.
Okay. So what is the future of standardized testing in Massachusetts?
I believe standardized testing is here to stay. It's certainly required by our state law. It's required by federal law. I think it's been an important, certainly not the only element, but an important element in our education reform efforts that have put us at the head of the nation. And of course, the other big change in our testing program is we're moving to computers. The next generation MCAS test is designed to be given on computers. And that, again, is another reflection of how our world has changed.
So how confident are you of the tests or the MCAS that we are currently using, administering them to our students at the moment? Or do you think it's just a matter of, as time goes on, the better we will be?
I'm very confident. We've got a lot of experience in test development. We have a great test development crew. People in other states think very highly of the MCAS test. In fact, Rhode Island is decided not to develop their own test. They're going to use the MCAS
yes.
test. So we think the information we get from MCAS is very valuable to us. We know from talking to teachers and principals that many of them find the information we feed back to them is valuable. Again, it's not just student scores, but what types of questions are students doing well on, what parts of the curriculum are they not doing well on that might need some beefing up.
Okay, and the big picture is?
Big picture is how well our students are doing.
To my viewers, you're watching WCTV with me, your host, Queen Banda. Again, my guest today was Mr. Jeff Wafferson, the Acting Commissioner for the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, here to talk about standardized testing. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.